Hello, I'm Darielle Snipes with a special edition of Talk to the CEO. These are trying times that we are all facing living during this pandemic. Many families are dealing with so many tough decisions and some are facing hardships. These, again, are trying times to say the least. As the school year is set to begin, many parents, including myself, are having to make the hard decisions about their children's education and their health. This, as school administrators are working overtime to weigh the pros and cons of whether to conduct in-person learning, remote learning, or a hybrid. No plan is going to satisfy every parent or their needs. Well, to answer how Cleveland Metropolitan School District is going to go forward in the fall is District CEO Eric Gordon. Well, hello, Eric. It's been a while since we've seen each other. We're socially distanced apart so that we can have this conversation.
Great to see you as well.
Nice to see you as well. So the decision has been made that CMSD will go 100% remote learning for the first 9 weeks of the school year. There had been speculation that it would be some type of hybrid of in-person and online learning. So what was the determining factor that you and the school board made to go 100% remote learning?
There were really three factors that we looked at. First is public health. Cuyahoga County has been in the red category, which is the high spread and risk category. And when we look at the 21-day data for Cleveland, it's not only high, but getting worse. And so that certainly has to be a consideration. Secondly, we looked at what our families and our educators were saying. Up to 2/3 of our families said that they were not at all comfortable or only slightly comfortable sending their children back to school, while only about 14% said that they were pretty comfortable or extremely comfortable. Same thing for educators. Then finally, we looked at the educational environment. And the reality is, whether we were in hybrid or remote, we were going to be dependent on a virtual learning platform for some or most of the learning. And so while the learning is kind of the least flexible, we're going to use it either way. The public health measures and the public sentiment said to us, start in virtual, get that really right. Let's get the earth calmed down and then get back to school.
The district and you did a lot of work with the reopening plan, speaking to numerous people, numerous stakeholders, including students and parents and even staff. Do you feel that they will appreciate that you did listen to what they had to say?
Well, I know from the feedback we've gotten that people have been very appreciative of having input. I've talked directly with students, I've talked directly with parents, with educators, we've contacted our faith leaders, we've reached out to civic leaders, and I'd say well over 100 or more people who have directly been engaged in multiple layers. I think one of the things I'm most proud of our community is that people recognize that none of us have been through this before, and we've all been working together to get to the best solutions possible. So I'm really proud of our team and our community for our response so far.
I know that you say that the remote learning is a short-term plan for the first 9 weeks, but what do you really think it's going to take for students to get back into the buildings?
Well, it's going to take masks. I've got mine right here. It's going to take hand washing and sanitizing, and it's going to take social distancing. We have to stop the spread of this disease. We have to see it declining so that we know that we can bring our students back safely, and not only for their safety, but for the safety of our educators and for the safety of their families when they go back and forth to school. We are prepared to outfit our schools for all of those safety requirements, but that only works if all of us are doing our part, that mask, that social distancing, and that frequent hand washing.
And so now that we are going remote learning, we were already remote in the last quarter of the last school year. So what's the difference going to be this quarter with remote learning than, say, last quarter?
Well, I think it's a significant difference. Last quarter, we were thrust into an emergency with literally about a day's notice. We were not equipped for remote learning. We didn't have devices. We didn't have a learning platform. And so we really worked to keep families engaged and enriched. We knew coming into this fall that we would need to do something, whether it be hybrid or remote. And so we've been planning for it all summer. So as we return, families will be able to expect a learning management system that their children are logging into. We'll continue our device distribution. We've already distributed 16,000 devices and over 10,000 hotspots. We will be grading classes. There will be virtual classes that we're expected to attend. There will be also what we call asynchronous learning. Students will be working on their homework or their projects or their small group activities on their own schedule, but it will be much more structured, much more schoolish than it was last spring. And I would just remind our community again, last spring was an emergency that came out of nowhere. We're still in the emergency, but we've known it and have been working towards solutions all summer long.
So I know a lot of people, including the students, are very, they want to know, including my 7-year-old, like, what is a school day going to look like? What time is school going to start? Is there going to be lunch breaks, bathroom breaks, holidays? Are we going to be able to take those during this time in remote learning?
Yep, so we have to be a little flexible still, of course, because that depends on you as a mom being able to support your 7-year-old. But in general, we plan to have a standard school day for all of our students across the district rather than the staggered days we normally run. It will be a shorter day because you can't Zoom all day long. I think all of our eyes are getting tired of that. But you will know that you have some AM classes that you need to be participating in. You will have breaks for lunch and for asynchronous learning, or for just to get a breath of fresh air, get outside, take a walk. You'll have some activities again in the afternoon, and you'll have a full schedule for your week. You will still have holidays. We still have to celebrate those kinds of things, and we need to create as much normalcy as possible. So we will be working to create a virtual school experience that really gives you that sense of normalcy as a student, while being sensitive to the needs of the parent who is supporting that student from home.
And speaking of parents, as you know, many parents work. Some have to work, are essential workers, and they have to work outside of the home. Some are fortunate that they can work inside the home. You've talked about creating an individual family plan for each family during this type of pandemic. So what will that look like?
Well, so we're really interested in every family having an education care plan. And it is things like, do you have a device for your child to use? Because it doesn't work if you don't have that tool. Do you have high-speed internet, or do we need to get you a hotspot? Are you able to connect to the learning management system? Let's make sure you can get logged in and can navigate it. Did you find the video tutorial? Do you have the hotline number so that if you have any trouble, you know where to call? Can we get your 7-year-old to do the assessment for me so your teacher will be ready next week when we start learning? Just have her do that exercise. What are your food plans? Are you going to be okay, or do we need to make sure you know the closest food site to pick up meals? What's your care plan? Do you have a place for your 7-year-old to go if you have to go back to work? And if not, can we recommend one of the 100 partners we have that provide out-of-school time supports? Or could maybe one of our high school students provide some care for service hours? So we really anticipate an individualized plan. What's a great time for me to check in with you on your 7-year-old's progress? What's the best time for learning to be occurring in your family? So that you and I have an agreement of what we're going to try to do for the first 9 weeks, and only the first 9 weeks. Part of the reason we're doing it in small chunks is because I feel like I can ask you, let's try this for 9 weeks, and then we'll check in again and we'll assess and adapt as we need to.
And so how will community partners play a role in all this?
So we have reached out to all of the out-of-school time providers. This is libraries, recreation centers, Boys and Girls Clubs, YMCAs, after-school all-stars, Open Door Academy, like every one of them we could think of. And we had over 100 respond back to us, letting us know what their capacity is. And so we have asked them to do two things. One is to switch their time from after school to during the school day, so that if a student doesn't have a safe place to be during the learning day, we can refer students to those programs. And the second is to provide hybrid extracurricular resources for or virtual extracurricular resources for kids and families, so that if they too don't feel they can safely operate, they can still be reaching into the home in the same way we are.
And so how will this remote learning look for those children with special needs, the homeless, English language learners?
Yep, so we have been contemplating the additional needs of our most fragile students. And so we'll be using some additional tools like teletherapy, where we can still provide our speech language or occupational therapy or other things through video technologies. Our platforms will have content that is delivered in multiple languages, and we'll still have our bilingual specialists and our paraprofessionals interacting with our kids and families. And we've been really working closely through our Project ACT to make sure we stay in contact with our foster and homeless youth. And that really needs to be as individualized as possible, because we have to meet their needs with whatever experience that they're encountering.
And so how will the district conduct career and technical services?
So career tech education and other specialized education is going to be tricky. I think there's a couple of things we can do. Some of it can be done virtually or remotely. For example, even if we were at Max Hayes today, our paint booth is actually a digital paint booth. There's no real paint there. And so using digital technologies, we can simulate some digital labs virtually. And we should also pack some of this coursework and actually save it for second semester. So let's get your English and your math and your science done first semester while we can't be at school, so that when we can get back to school, instead of having a shorter day in the lab or in the shop, you get more time to catch up on that content. Because while the booths are really incredible, the welding booth that doesn't actually weld but it's digital is really incredible, at the end of the day you still need to weld in order to get that certificate. And so we can pack some of that at the back end while we all work through this front end.
And so what are the plans for the other specialized schools, like the Cleveland School of the Arts? How will that operate the first quarter? You know, they're very in person with the singing and dancing and music.
Yep. And very similarly, I mean, unfortunately, singing and instrumental music is one of the most dangerous things you can do right now. Projecting your voice is important, using your diaphragm, right? Well, this is how this disease spreads. Blowing into an instrument is exactly how you play in a symphonic band. So again, and you can look at our graduation ceremonies to see it happen. You can do this stuff virtually. Our all-city art students did an amazing rendition of the national anthem, and then a just triumphant song for our graduates, and they did it all from their homes. And it included dance, and it included other forms of art. Even our Board of Education, we were teasing ourselves, we're almost able to say the pledge together, right? So even if we can learn it. So again, some of this can and should be done virtually to keep our students engaged in their passions, and some of this also will have to be compacted, where we actually can't do maybe the juried concert live until maybe next semester, but we can be doing virtual concerts or virtual plays. And I'm looking forward to seeing our ingenuity and our innovation from our students really shine in this space.
That's right, they were definitely creative. So, but for the families that depend on CMSD for wraparound services, how will those needs be met?
Well, we continued to offer all of our Say Yes services over this shutdown period. Our Say Yes family support specialists were just incredible. They not only served their schools, but typically picked up more schools as well. Say Yes is expanding into 43 schools across the city for this coming year, so none of that has slowed down. We're also talking very actively about how to move forward with integrated health, so using telehealth as an example, mental health services. And we will continue to operate our food program, whether we're hybrid or remote. So even as we start remotely, any family that needs breakfast or lunch will still have access for that through their school.
And so, as you know, Cleveland is the 4th worst digitally connected city in the country. And that was definitely highlighted when Governor Mike DeWine shut down schools back in March. And you and CMSD and the district have worked tirelessly to make sure that our students are connected. So how will that work continue throughout the fall now that we are going 100% remote for 9 weeks?
I think one of the best things that happened over this summer that maybe our community doesn't know is that through leadership of the Cleveland Foundation, the George Gunn Foundation, the county, the city, and a nonprofit called Digital C, CMHA, the district, and many other partners, there is now a digital equity fund in place that is working aggressively to get Cleveland connected. You're right, we were the 4th worst connected city. If we have anything to say about it, we will not be at the end of this. So for the district's part, we have already connected over 10,000 families using hotspots. We will make sure that every family has a connectivity as we go through that care planning process. But over the course of the year, we're working to move families off of that hotspot and onto low-cost, high-speed, reliable internet through the nonprofit Digital C. And what does that mean? It means like $18, $19 a month. And to make that happen, the district's actually going to pay that bill for our families to get them connected during this interim time. And then as things settle down and families can return to more normal, you can actually stop subscribing for cable that costs a whole lot more, pay for your live streaming on your internet that is only 19 bucks a month.
Way cheaper. Yeah. So for our scholars who are inquisitive, can we talk a little bit more in specifics about like the age groups and what that day may look like? So let's start with our youngest scholars. How will a day look like for them? I know being in front of a screen might not be so conducive because their attention span is not as long.
Yep. So first of all, I think we all have to acknowledge that none of us have been through this before. So we're going to do the best we can. We're going to keep learning. We're going to keep growing. We're going to keep adapting. And that's why I've been stressing for 9 weeks. And actually, the first 9 weeks is really 6 weeks, because we're going to take teacher time first, those learning plans next, and then 6 weeks of practice before we reevaluate. Having said that, we could imagine that our youngest learners have fewer what are called synchronous learnings, where the parent has to help them get onto a Zoom, be on a class, that sort of thing, and more of the kind of things that parents can help children do at home. So either online or printing off materials like workbooks and manipulatives, and going on virtual field trips to the Science Center or the Art Museum and those sorts of things. And not that there won't be curriculum, there absolutely will, but we understand that both it's harder to attend to a screen when you're little, and also it takes more parent support, and that parents are not trained as teachers, and so we should ask parents to be able to do things that they can succeed at, right? We will be using iPads for our younger kids, so it's touchable, and it will be much more content that is more graphic, some more cartoonish looking, that sort of thing, which our kids are already used to from school. And then we're supplementing that learning platform with an actual platform designed for young children called Seesaw.
Great. And then so for middle schoolers, what will that look like?
So middle schoolers are going to have a more kind of a traditional core set of classes that they need to complete. And so they'll have more scheduled times when they're expected to be on their classes and interacting with their classmates. And they'll have some freedom and flexibility of when they do other work, and that it should be thought of as homework. So I encourage us through this whole experience to think about the virtual classes as being the in-school time, but that you always had homework. You always did stuff on your own schedule. And it's a gradual release. So for middle school students, there will be a lot of direct contact in a number of different ways. Make sure you watch this video and do the worksheet. Make sure you're on when you're talking with Mr. Gordon and the class is working through your math concepts. But then you're going to need to get with your group to do your project. You're going to need to do your homework before we check in tomorrow morning, things of that nature.
And then those in high school, how's that going to look?
So high school is likely to be the most personalized. High school schedules are the most diverse. High schoolers also have the most capacity to really be independent. And we have, again, in the district examples of that independence really working well. Our School of One or our summer schools as examples. So you will still have a teacher contact, you'll still have teacher support, but you could imagine that you're using more personalized learning that gives you more flexibility about when and how you do your content, and a lot more opportunity to really do a Zoom call with your other classmates and work on an authentic task together. And that can be done just like we talked about with the choir, that task was a number of students picking a time, coordinating it, working with their instructor to put together an authentic demonstration of their learning.
And can our scholars expect to take tests and be graded?
Yes, this is school. So you will have quizzes and tests and other assessments, mostly, hopefully, more authentic demonstrations of your learning. Tests and quizzes play a role, but we really want to see you put it to work. And yes, we will have grades. Again, last year was an emergency. It was an enrichment period when we were not equipped for this. But despite the fact that the nation and the world is still in this emergency, we can't just fall down and wait for the world to return. We have to be resilient and rise up, and that means putting school back into session.
That's right, and so they can expect to be, that attendance will be taken as well.
There will be attendance. Obviously, attendance will look differently. It will be those engagements that you're expected to be on, and also that you did the asynchronous engagements, you showed up for your projects, you completed your tasks, but all of those things will be considered for attendance.
And so as we all know that we are still very much in this pandemic, and a lot of our families have experienced a lot of challenges. Some have experienced some trauma. CMSD is leading the nation when it comes to social and emotional learning. So how is the district prepared to meet those needs, continue to meet those needs this first quarter?
Well, I'd start with that care plan. The reason that we talked about having that care plan is for social and emotional needs. And we ask about it in our surveys. How are our kids doing? How are you assessing your 7-year-old doing? We will still have our rapid response team if we see a student or a family that's experiencing some kind of trauma or crisis, or simply I'm cooped up and I'm starting to lose it. Like, I need somebody to talk to, right? Where we can refer to our counselors and our psychologists and our other related service providers. Secondly, we will continue to teach the social emotional learning skills. They're more important now than ever. So, if I'm working in a group on a Zoom and I'm not able to manage my frustration, that's going to disrupt the whole learning space. That means I have to first recognize that I'm frustrated and then have a skill to manage it. if I notice that you're not in a good mood, how I respond to you is going to either make it better or worse. And so having those relationship skills, and again, that relationship awareness matters. And those 4 SEL tools are then the key to problem solving and working on more complex tasks and in working in these more complex environments. So we'll keep teaching those skills and have a lot of remote resources for them as well. And we have social and emotional wellness tools for our adults too. So we will continue to have our COVID-19 hotline, 838-WELL, where people can call and get support if they think they might have been exposed to COVID-19, talk to a school nurse. We'll have our rapid response hotline and our crisis hotline. And we have a program for our educators called Ease at Work for people who need assistance as well.
Great. So if conditions improve within those 9 weeks, would you consider opening up schools early?
So we're likely to stay in remote learning for the first 9 weeks. I will want to see at least 21 days of consistent improvement before I would even begin considering recommending to the board that we move to hybrid. I want us to move to hybrid. We need to get back into schools, not just for the learning, but we need to get back to some normalcy. I don't know about you, but I'm really, really tired of being in my home.
Oh, yeah.
And I love my home, so, but I want to go out. And so we need to get there, but we would need to see at least 3 solid weeks of positive trends that give us assurance that we can continue to trend positively and get this disease under control and behind us before we would bring people back to school or work.
And so when we do hopefully go back to school, what will it look like with the social distancing of desks, and what can students and families and staff expect when they go into to the school buildings?
Well, first I have to say we partnered with university hospitals to actually walk through our schools to understand how we can make them safe spaces and how we can rearrange the physical space, signage, all of those kinds of conditions. Things like taking down doors where they were unnecessary so that you didn't touch handles that you didn't need, or having directional hallways so that you don't have to try to keep 6 feet in a hallway by pressing against lockers, but you all move in a circular motion, or knowing which stair is down and which stair is up so that you're not going to encounter somebody unexpectedly, right? How do you place desks, and thinking of a hula hoop space that a student would be in as an example. And so we are working, even though we're in remote, to outfit our schools to be ready for that kind of social distancing. We're also installing hand pumps and sanitation stations throughout the buildings, particularly at entrances and exits, outside of our bathroom spaces, in spaces that students are likely to travel frequently. We're buying the personal protective equipment so that everybody has their masks, and also face shields for either those who can't use a mask or for younger children where masks may not be practical. We are working on rerouting school buses, because you're not going to be able to put 40 to 50 kids on a school bus. You're only going to put 14 to 20, and so thinking about routing differently. So it will, in some ways, it'll be the places we know, but they're going to look and feel very different. You're going to see spots on the floor to remind you 6 feet apart, things of that nature.
And so when we do return, if a parent is uneasy about sending their child to school, or they have some type of health issues and they can't return, what's the plan for those families?
Sure. In our hybrid model, we always envisioned that there's essentially 3 parts of the model. One is the in-person instruction, where every student will have some access to teachers during the course of a week, typically 2 to 3 days a week. The second is an all virtual environment for families that say, I just can't do it, or I won't do it. I have a health issue, or I'm just scared. This has been scary. And then the third, which I think is also important and unique to us, is you may have a family who actually does send their child back, but then has a COVID-19 exposure for any number of reasons and has to self-isolate. And so we plan to have a self-isolation team of teachers and educators, that if I have to self-isolate, that there's somebody working with me to keep my learning plan in place until I can go back. So it's a multi-layer hybrid model to make sure that we have options for every family.
I know that students really enjoy sports. So what is sports going to look like in the fall? Will students be able to play sports?
I think in the remote environment, the answer is no. If it's not safe to be at school, it's not safe to be on the playing fields either. And I know that that's a heartbreak for our young people. Sports and other extracurriculars are really important. We will do our best to provide other opportunities. We started an esports program in the district in the last couple of years. We'll try to expand that rapidly to give students other productive things to do that they enjoy. But I have to say, if it's not safe to go to school, it's not safe to be on our fields. If we are in a hybrid model and we're able to provide the same kinds of personal protection for our students, our coaches, and their families, then we will permit those kind of activities. But I candidly hope that our state will consider what many others have and move many of the sports for fall activities to next spring, so that kids still get the opportunity before the year ends, but that just like we talked about for some of the technical and artistic classes, that we pack those things toward the end of the year and buy some time to get this coronavirus under control.
I understand. So the Board of Education has placed a levy renewal and increase on the ballot this fall. These are difficult times. People have lost their jobs. The unemployment rate is at an all-time high. Is this a difficult ask to ask residents at this time?
Look, it's always a difficult ask in this city. We have the single highest childhood poverty. The mayor said when we went for the first levy, we're asking people to pay for a levy they can't afford. And that is no more true, it's every bit as true today as it was in the past 2 cycles. The candid reality is we have no choice. The levy will expire on December 31st if voters don't have a chance to renew it. And if it expires, it is 12% of our budget, or $67 million, and that means that we will make devastating cuts for the second semester of this year. We will have no choice. So the dilemma that I faced was not should we ask, it was what should we ask. We have not had new money in 8 years. Levies do not increase in their value once voted on, and so they haven't kept up with inflation, which has increased 12% in that period of time. If we were to have asked for just a renewal of 15 mills, even if it had passed, we would have made cuts immediately after it. And it is not fair to Cleveland voters to ask them to renew a levy and then tell them it wasn't enough to do the job. So we are asking for a slight increase of 5 mills. That's about $7 per family for an average home in Cleveland. If it's a $100,000 home, it's about $14, but most homes in Cleveland are median is about $42,000, $43,000. And we know it's a tough ask, but I think what Clevelanders have come to count on is honesty. And the honest answer is we have to ask for something, and if we only ask for a renewal, we're going to cut programs that they expect us to fund right after we told them to keep paying the tax.
And like you just said, these are difficult times, difficult financial times. The state cut the CMSD school budget shortly after the pandemic began, and you've been watching the budget closely. Can you just talk about how going to remote learning and doing all these new things on a dime has affected the CMSD budget?
Yeah, well, as we just said, we were at the end of a levy cycle anyway, which is always the toughest financial time for school districts. It's a cyclic kind of experience where you get more resources on the front and less at the back. So we were already in that space. COVID-19 created all kinds of new costs that we didn't anticipate. The biggest ones were technology. We've spent millions and millions of dollars on buying devices and hotspots, and we'll spend millions more in the coming years to make sure everybody is equipped and that learning system I talked about is in place. We have also had to spend millions of dollars on PPE, not even to open schools, but to operate over the shutdown period. Our people have been back and working and prepping our buildings, and they have to be in masks and sanitized and safe and distanced. We're adding the signage and the plexiglass at contact points so that when you pick up lunches at our meal sites that our staff are safe behind the plexiglass, or if you need something from one of our offices, our secretary and you are safely separated. So between those costs, the PPE costs, the training costs to retool all of our educators, and I mean this as a retraining. This is not how we were taught to teach, and our educators have been amazing and resilient, and I'm so proud of them. But I need our public to understand they're doing this despite the fact that this is not what any of us were taught to do in our profession. And so this is a workforce retraining effort which will take deep investment. So we're spending a lot of resources at the same time that we're seeing deep revenue cuts. We lost $11.2 million from the state over the course of last year and this year. It looks like that may be it, and that would be really great for us if possible. And the governor's really worked hard to keep it as far away from us as he could. But we also could face deep tax delinquencies, people not paying their tax, which would hurt our local revenue. We again have the levy facing us, and we have all of these COVID-related expenses. And so times are going to be tough. This is why, though, we've been advocating that the federal government must have another stimulus package, and it must take care of K-12 education, not just Cleveland or urban schools, but all of us, and cities, counties, and states. The federal government's the only one that can.
Yes, they're the ones that can help us out. And as we have just been talking about, these are extraordinary times. People are stressed, parents are stressed. What can you say to our families to reassure them that the district plan is working?
Well, I think first what I would say is that, and I said it earlier, we are painfully aware that none of us have ever been through this. So we're not out there declaring victory, and we're going to keep working together to adjust, adapt, and grow and improve. And what I want everybody to do is to do what they can do successfully. And so I am not asking a mom of a 7-year-old to suddenly be a great, 7-year-old teacher. I'm asking you to be a great mom. And so that means that, count things in your house with your child to keep your child counting. Read with your child, or ask your child to read to you so that they keep reading. Do things that you can succeed at as a parent. Don't feel like you're somehow failing as a teacher. That actually will only add to the emotional stress and not detract from it. And I would remind us, and it's hard to hear, but people keep saying learning loss, learning loss, learning loss. There's no learning lost. We can learn, and we will learn. We're losing time, and that's unfortunate. But when we get our time back, we will learn to read, we will learn to do math, we will learn to do chemistry. So it's going to be okay. And so give ourselves permission to do what we can as effectively as we can in partnership while we weather through something that literally hasn't happened since the early 1900s.
Right. And so what would you say to our scholars as they enter another quarter of remote learning? Our seniors, our new seniors who might feel that they're missing those senior moments, or for students that are going to a new school but they can't enter that school just yet. What would you say to them?
Actually, I think I should tell you what they've said to me. I actually just finished a focus group with my high school students, my student advisory committee, and they really gave great feedback. They are obviously very interested in graduation and in college readiness and those sorts of things, but they really want to know how to actively and successfully do this. And they gave great advice. They offered about helping new students and helping us know when a new student might be struggling. Being a virtual peer mentor for kids that are joining their schools. They said to me, what about a student who moves into our school and has never seen the building? And so we're going to be doing, with your help and the communications team's help, we're going to be doing some virtual school visits to let people see it. But our students are ready to help. They want to be part of the solution too. And the thing that I would say to our community, and I think adults too often overlook this, is that our students are not powerless. And so let's not make them powerless by fixing everything for them. Let's let them be part of the solution. Hopefully we'll have our regular graduations again, but I think we also demonstrated that we'll find ways to celebrate as a community, even if that celebration is distanced or virtual. And I think that, again, we were in a crisis that we had no idea was coming a few months ago. We're still in crisis, but we know they're there. And so this is where we rise up and thrive as opposed to falling down and dying. And we're going to be fine.
We are, and I must say those graduations were fabulous, though. Those
I got to
graduations.
attend about half of them because they were overlapping, and it was certainly the thing that gave me life as we've moved through all of this. It's the kids that give me energy, and they did again on the virtual. They asked, when's the next student advisory? We can do it by Zoom. So the students are ready, and we've got to be ready for them.
All right, well, thank you so much for your time and your information, and let's have a great next school year.
Let's have a great year.